It's time we invite our guest speaker. Our next speaker is someone that I personally look up to in terms of education and mindset. She's a passionate public speaking coach who also enjoys deep conversations about well-being and philosophy. Let's welcome K.Ponpimon with a round of applause.
But here's the catch. It's dirty, and it's moving also to particles in Chinese. Now, would you still drink it? Of course not. You would probably review the title. You would ask, why would I drink something that can harm my life? And you're absolutely right. We would never intentionally drink something we know that can harm our life. And yet, every day, most of us drink something much more harmful. The unchecked emotions we experience. Just like dirty water can harm our body, our unchecked emotions can do the same thing. It can negatively impact our thoughts, behaviors, and relationships. But unlike water, we don't always stop to think about how we should filter them before we consume them. Instead, what we tend to do is that we bottle them up and lock them inside our minds. As a teacher, I used to think that the most important part is to deliver every lesson flawlessly. But recently, I've come to realize that the most important part is to have the emotional capacity to fully understand students' emotions and behaviors. So we can create a safe environment for them to be more open and learn more efficiently. But having this emotional capacity to be able to understand and process emotions is not only useful inside, but also outside of the classroom as well. Because it can help us to maintain emotional well-being, as well as good relationship with ourselves and others. How? Now, I'd like for you to think about the time when your loved one said something hurt you. What about the time when your work didn't meet your expectations? What kind of emotion do you end up carrying to bed? Have you ever stopped to think to them? After a few years of introspections, along with my teaching experience and a few academic coursework in psychology in graduate school, I come up with the emotion filter, a tool to help us cleanse the clutter in our lives, much like purifying water. Now, let's take a look at the first step on how we can filter our emotions. Awareness. It is really important for us to be conscious about what we feel. Because often, when we face with difficult situations, what we tend to do is we would try to ignore those emotions and we tell ourselves to just move on and forget it. So, what I'd like you to do is, whenever you feel those intense emotions start to build up inside, name them. Is it anger, hunger, sadness, guilt, fear, or shame? Because when we are conscious of how we feel, it could help us to process and to choose how to react to that particular situation better. Now, moving on to the second step, understanding. And by understanding, I mean we really need to understand the root cause of our emotions. We can start by asking questions like, why am I feeling frustrated? Remember, we are being emotions. And we can keep asking, am I reacting to something real, or am I projecting fear and assumptions onto the situations? By doing this, it helps us to separate what's true from what's dishonest. For example, let's say you're upset over something at work, you're not sure what it is. There at home, something small like losing the keys or stubbing your toes on a table's corner can make you snap immediately. Now, the root cause of that reaction Was it because of the key, the toe, but maybe a little bit on the tennis corner or there. But if we realize what actually caused that reaction, it could help us to choose to react without impulsivity. Moving on to the next step, processing. This is where we actually have to take action to clear up those emotions. And we can do that by taking a break, start journaling, talking to someone we trust, or even considering consult professionals if needed. Now, when they say that it's easier said than done, this is where we actually have to put in an effort to actually work for ourselves, make a difference, to become more emotionally secure. Now, I know that this step might sound a bit challenging to most of us, so let me give you an example. So one of my students, whenever she has to give an important presentation, this is a trick that she likes to do. So she would run to the bathroom and she would stand right in front of the mirror and she would give herself a little pep talk. See, it doesn't have to be something funny as long as it works for you. Now, it is really important that we acknowledge that while filtering water and emotions, we share some similarities. These two also have some major distinctions because while water flows from high places to low places, our emotions don't always follow that same pattern. Instead, they rise, falls, and fluctuates over time. And so, even when we try our best to filter them with awareness, understanding, and processing, sometimes we might still find ourselves drinking that same instant glass of water. So, this is where our protagonist comes in. Self-empathy. Self-empathy allows us to notice that ever-changing pattern of our emotions. And although the term is not as widely used as self-love or self-compassion, its idea of just being there and standing up for your own emotions without judgment is truly powerful. Based on the work of Dr. Sherman, a professor in philosophy from Georgetown University, she highlighted that self-empathy is the key element for veterans to be able to recover from their past moral and emotional injuries. She also pointed out that in order for all of us to have this journey of emotional growth, we truly need to practice self-empathy, since it helps us to accept our past feelings as they are. As I was preparing for this talk, a thought struck me, and it stayed with me for a little while. It said, who am I to even be talking about all these emotions? What credibility do I have? I'd probably name that emotion self-doubt in capital O. But after I sat with myself for about 5 hours trying to process this inscrutable mind, I've come to realize that being able to express and discuss our emotions is a part of a shared human experience where we all can learn to. And with a few graduate coursework in psychology, plus with my teaching experience, it should be enough for me to keep going and not give up. But most importantly, to even talk about self-empathy in the first place, I need to first show that to myself. And so here I am. What I'm trying to say is, most of the time, we're our own biggest critics. We tell ourselves our emotions are weak and unnecessary. Right in those moments, self-empathy stands right in front of those emotions and tell them, I am here, I see you, and I accept you for what you are. As a teacher, practicing self-empathy allows me to take a pause and reflect, especially in those days where the student's progress doesn't meet my expectation. Instead of blaming it on myself, I would try to understand the growth for both me and my students. Take time, but it's good ups and downs. advice I've ever given was to provide yourself with the same kindness you would offer if someone you love. But self-empathy, take this a step further. It's not just about being supportive and compassionate towards yourself all the time. It's more about understanding and accepting your best and worst parts without judgment. So, when life hands you a flood of overwhelming emotions, remember this. You don't have to let yourself drown in them. You have the power to filter those emotions with awareness, understanding, processing, and most importantly, to have self-empathy. When you fully allow yourself to emerge in your own emotions without judgments, your emotions will become the source of